Frederick Douglass, Forever Free. Bread for Lessons. 8-year-old Frederick Douglass grabbed a loaf of bread from the kitchen and slipped out the back door and ran errands. Frederick was enslaved, but he was allowed to take as much bread as he liked. He knew that he had more to eat than some boys in his neighborhood, so he took food to trade with them. While he had plenty of bread, the other boys had something he wanted even more. They knew how to write. As Frederick wanted to walk down the street for Baltimore, Maryland, he thought about how unjust it was that he wasn't allowed to read. Just the day before, his enslaver's wife, Mrs. Sophia Auld, had snatched the newspaper away from him as he tried to read it in secret. All Frederick wanted was an education, but he wasn't allowed for enslaved people. It wasn't allowed for enslaved people in the 1820s. In fact, it was against the law. That's why Frederick had made friends with poor white boys in the city. They had been allowed to attend school. First he teased them, saying, "I bet I know more of the alphabet than you do." He'd write a few letters in the dirt. The other boys would write what they knew, and Frederick would learn to write those new letters. Now he was buying food for proper lessons in reading and writing. Up ahead, Frederick saw one of his friends waiting to give him a lesson and hurried to join him. Frederick would give up his lunch every day to learn. Born into slavery. Frederick was born on February 1817 or 1818. He never knew the date of his birth, and though he knew his father was white, he never knew who he was. His mother was Harriet Bailey, but Frederick was raised by his grandmother, Bessie Bailey. When he was 8 years old, Frederick was sent to work as a houseboy for some of his enslavers' relatives. As Auld family in Baltimore, Maryland, when Frederick first came to the Aulds, Sophia Auld helped teach him the alphabet. She gave him several lessons before her husband forbade her education, and slavery was incompatible. He said an enslaved person who read and who learned to write would become dissatisfied with their condition to deserve freedom. This proved to be true. The more books and newspapers Frederick read, the clearer his own thoughts about slavery became. The more he despised slavery, the more dejected he was. For some time, Frederick struggled to comprehend the word abolition. Whenever an enslaved people ran away or did something an enslaver disliked, abolition was blamed. Frederick tried looking up the word in the dictionary, but it merely said the act of abolition. What was being abolished? In 1831, Frederick read an article about the abolition movement and the people who were striving to end slavery. Now he understood. Some white people wanted to abolish their slavery too. He also learned that black people were free in some states, and he began dreaming of escape. Once you learn to read, Douglass wrote later in life, you will be forever free. Understanding that education and freedom were hand in hand, he began giving lessons to other enslaved people until enslavers stopped his Sunday school. He earned a reputation among enslaved people as a leader, and among enslavers as a troublemaker. Escape. For years, Frederick had lived in the city. At 15, he was sent to work on a farm as a field hand of Edward Covey, a brutal man who beat enslaved people into obedience, loaning Frederick to Covey may have been Al's way of punishing Frederick for trying to educate other enslaved people as well as himself. Covey almost succeeded in breaking his spirit. After enduring 6 months of abuse, though, 16-year-old Frederick fought back. Later he wrote, "You were in it for nearly 2 hours. Covey at length let me go, puffing and blowing at a great rate, saying that if I had not resisted, he would have not whipped me half so much. The truth was that he had not whipped me at all." After their confrontation, Frederick began to plan his escape in earnest. He tried once and was caught. Still, Frederick continued to dream of freedom and work on his literacy, even joining the East Baltimore Mental Improvement Society, a debate club. It was there that Frederick met Anne Marie, a free black woman. Together, Anne and Frederick planned his escape, but she sent him her savings so that he could buy a train ticket and sewed him a slaver's uniform. Dressed in this and carrying a freedman's passport, he traveled through Delaware and Pennsylvania to New York. The escape took a little less than 24 hours, but as he later wrote, "I lived more in one day than in a year of my slave life." Speaking to audiences years later, Frederick would say, "I appear more before you this evening as a thief and a robber. I stole this head, these limbs, this body, and my master, and ran off with them." Escaping didn't mean that Frederick was truly free. Enslaved people who made it free to a free state could live as if they were free, but they could still be seized and taken back to the slave state. Frederick sent for Anne to join him, and they were married in 1838. Since Frederick was a fugitive who could be caught and forced back into slavery, they took a new name, Douglas. A newlywed Mr. and Mrs. Douglas settled in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and had 5 children together. Writing and speaking, Douglas began to speak to anti-slavery meetings with his first-hand account of life as an enslaved people and of his bold escape. He became the voice of the abolition movement. His very existence countered the enslavers' argument that enslaved people lacked the intellect to function as free American citizens. Yet Douglas was so articulate that some white people refused to believe that he had ever been enslaved. Douglas wrote the first of 3 autobiographies, narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. When it was published in 1845, critics charged that the book, like Douglass, was fake. No one who had been a slave could write so eloquently, they argued, yet the book was an instant success and persuaded many people that someone who had been enslaved could possess a green mind. At the same time, the book included details could, that could have led Douglas's arrest as a fugitive. In order to avoid capture, Douglas went abroad for 2 years on a speaking tour of Ireland and England. An electrifying speaker, he was a star overseas, and fans were raised the money for Douglas's freedom. A purchase called manumission. When Douglas returned to the United States in 1848, he founded a newspaper. He also penned thousands of speeches and editorials calling for social justice. "I expose slavery in the country," wrote Douglas. "Before I expose it is to kill it. Slavery is one of the monsters of darkness, to whom the light of truth in death." One of his most famous speeches was "What to the Slave in the 4th of July." When he delivered the speech on July 5th, 1852, Douglas surprised his audience by posing questions about the Independence Day meant for enslaved people and those once enslaved. "What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the greatest principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extend to us?" Land of the Free. By the Civil War, Douglas was the most admired black man in the United States. In 1863, he served as President Lincoln's advisor during the drafting of Emancipation Proclamation, an order that freed the majority of enslaved people. Yet the abolition of slavery wasn't a stated goal of the war, though Douglas repeatedly urged Lincoln to make it one. Some historians think Douglas helped inspire the renowned Gettysburg Address and the Lincoln inaugural address. Douglas also convinced Lincoln to allow black soldiers to fight in the North. The Union Army's 54th Massachusetts Regiment was the first to be comprised of black soldiers, including two of Douglas's sons. Douglas's writing and speaking helped end slavery in the 17th Amendment, passing after the Civil War ended in 1865. 3 years later, the 4th Amendment granted citizenship to people once enslaved, and shortly after that, in 1850, the 15th Amendment granted even more citizens, including those once enslaved, the right to vote. For the rest of his life, Douglas continued to promote equality for all Americans. He wanted the United States to reach its potential as a land of free for black people, women, Native Americans, and immigrants too. It would unite with anybody to do right, with nobody to do wrong, Douglas said. Douglas remained married to Anne for 44 years, until she passed away in 1882. 2 years later, he married Helen Pitts, an advocate for civil rights. The marriage could cause controversy since Pitts was a white woman, but as Douglas asked in a letter to a friend, "What business has the world with the color of my wife?" Today, Douglas is often referred to as the father of the civil rights movement. 70 years after his death, as the height of that movement, the United States Postal Service honored him with his own 1965 postage stamp. It changed the way the country thought about slavery and race, and left behind words to continue to inspire Americans, including his newspaper's motto, Right is not right is of no sex. Truth is of no color.